Now, one of the things that the authors point out is that there are differences among plants and animals in their stoichiometry, in their chemical makeup. So for example, animals have higher nitrogen concentrations than plants do. So for example, a typical animal, if you were to grind it up, 7 to 14% of the mass would be in nitrogen. Plants, for example, are a lot less, somewhere on the order of 0.5% to 4%. So the nitrogen requirements to produce a given unit of tissue for an animal is a lot higher than for a plant. Plants also differ in a number of ways, and one of those is defensive compounds. We'll talk more about those later. But if you go to a grassland and there's lots of forbs in there, for example, lots of eudicots, wildflowers, that often they're there, especially in a graze system, because they taste bad. And they have a lot of compounds in them that are going to prevent or at least discourage eating. So if we have something like ambrosia here, that's going to have one set of compounds as opposed to purple flowers, which look like monarda or echinaceas, things like that, retividas, that are just going to have a whole suite of compounds that are going to interfere with digestion or provide some toxicity. We have two different terms to describe limitation in trophic dynamics. The first is bottom up. And essentially when we talk about limitation, we ask if you add a substance to an ecosystem, do we see an increase in the size of that pool or in the rate at which something occurs? When we have bottom-up limitation in an ecosystem, essentially what we're asking is whether herbivores are limited by the quantity or the quality of food. So in this case, if we were to increase the amount of primary production, would we see an increase in the number of herbivores in that ecosystem? If so, we would say that it's bottom-up limited. Alternatively, it might not necessarily be the quantity of food, but the quality. So there's enough plants there, but the quality is too low. And by increasing the quality of that food, be it the amount of energy in that food or the amount of protein or the concentration of other elements that are required for growth, that's called bottom-up limitation. In contrast, there's also top-down limitation, and that's when herbivores are going to be limited by predation. So in this case, we can add more food, more plant material. We can also increase the quality of that food, but not necessarily see an increase in the number of herbivores. In that case, the number of herbivores are being limited by carnivores. So this is a system where we think of as being top-down limitation. And really what this shows is that there's differences in limitation based on among ecosystems based on whether it's limited from the bottom. So if we draw our food chain and we have plants here, and we take a look at how many herbivores we have, it's bottom-up limitation. If it's really the amount or the productivity of plants, if not the quality, that's limiting how many herbivores that we see. But in other cases, it could be the carnivores that are limiting the herbivores, and we call that top-down limitation.